Within the cloud, we should adopt and use zero trust. Microsoft highly recommends it when it comes to security in the cloud. And that means we're going to do a quick refresher on the principles of zero trust just to make sure that we're back in the mindset of using zero trust whenever we come up with or architect a security solution. So here we go. So the first guiding principle of zero trust is verify explicitly. What this means is we always, we'll put that in all caps here, always, very important, again, always authenticate and authorize everything based on all the data points that we have available. So we're talking, of course, our user accounts. It could be some type of service account. It could be an application. No matter what it is, we do not want to trust anything. We want to verify each and every one of these things, even if they're already in our environment. And that is the first guiding principle of zero trust, which again, verify explicitly. Now I mentioned we want to authorize and authenticate based on all available data points. And what do I mean by all available data points? Well, think about this. When we have tools such as conditional access policies that allow us to take a look to see where a device is located when their user is authenticating, or if that user has failed authentication multiple times, maybe they are considered a high-risk account at this point. Well, those are all data points we can take into consideration. So for example, if we've had a user account with 10 failed logins in the last 5 minutes, and all these logins are coming from a foreign country, but we know that the user has recently authenticated on site, well, then there's a problem. So we want to consider those data points when performing our authentication and authorization. And that is our verify explicitly. Next up, we have use least privilege. This goes to our Azure AD and our role-based access control. The idea we want to provide just enough privilege for a user to do their job and no more. And what tools can we use to do this? Well, how about our just-in-time access and our just enough access? And we can perform some of these through our privileged identity management within Azure AD. That's our PIM. We can also create risk-based adaptive policies that are going to help us only provide enough privilege for users to do their job. And then lastly, of course, we want to use all of our data protection services that are watching our data and how it's used, and we have policies around that. Remember, we had talked about insider risk and the idea of creating policies to watch activities of our users and what's going on, and to report when unusual activity is happening. So that's our least privilege. And then lastly, assume breach. So what this means is we need to assume that a breach has happened or could happen, and that we need to continue to increase and be diligent with our security to make sure our network designs and our security solutions are in place to address a breach. Now, first of all, we're going to talk about segmentation. And there's really two pieces to this. We have our network segmentation. So we have a hub network here, and this is generally where we would have our Bastion host set up. Our VPNs would terminate into. Maybe we have our Azure firewall running in here and our internet connection there. And everything terminates into this hub. And then off of here, we have spoke virtual networks that provide various services. Maybe we have some database services over here. We've got some VMs over here. We perform this hub and spoke setup so that we can route various traffic once it gets into the hub through this Azure firewall or whatever type of security services we're doing, and we can filter who can access what. And that's the idea of a segmentation. But that is network segmentation. We also need to think about segmentation as it pertains to our roles and the idea of separation of duties, so that one individual doesn't have enough privilege or power within the environment to perform fraudulent activities. We have a set of checks and balances throughout the use of separation of duties. For example, the person submitting an expense report, once they submit that, they shouldn't be approving their own expense reports, right? Absolutely not. Well, that is an example of separation of duties. Now, that is our segmentation. And the whole idea behind segmentation is we really want to, at least within the network segmentation, reduce the blast radius of an incident. So if there is an infection or a breach or something, that it's contained to a specific area of the environment. Now, other than segmentation, we also want to be using encryption. We should be using end-to-end encryption for our data. That's our data at rest, our data in transit, data in processing should all be encrypted in some form or fashion, so that if we assume there's already a breach, if everything's encrypted, it doesn't matter. The person on the inside, that bad guy over here, can't read the encrypted data. So that's why we would want to use encryption. Now, we also want to use analytics. And analytics comes with many of the Defender tools that we've talked about. And the idea with that is it helps us to get visibility so that we can see what's happening in our environment. Because if we don't have visibility into our environment, we can't identify if there is a breach. And we won't be able to then investigate because we don't have that analytics capabilities. So the big takeaway, of course, is what we want to secure everything using zero trust. Well, what's everything? Well, how about our identity and our endpoints and our applications? Absolutely. And there's more. How about our data? That's our data at rest, data in transit, data that's being processed. How about our actual infrastructure? Absolutely. That's our infrastructure there, and our networks, which are part of the infrastructure. But think about your networks, because we have cloud-based networks, but we may also have on-prem networks, and we could have connectivity between them. We may have actually business partners, so we may have B2B connections, and those are networks as well. So we need to consider all of these things when we are securing our environment, and it must be based on zero trust so that we can have the best chance at being successful at securing our environments using the zero trust principles. I hope it's been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.